In 1882, a child prodigy wrote a diary so chilling, it predicted deaths with eerie precision. Every page, every word came true. I found this diary in my attic, and its secrets haunt me. How could a child know such things? Join me as I unravel the mystery of this cursed book, page by page, and discover the truth that's too shocking to ignore. Are you ready to face the unexplainable? I was only 10 when I wrote the diary in 1882, my small hands trembling with every word. It wasn't just a journal. It was a compulsion, a force that gripped me. Each night, I'd wake in a cold sweat, my mind flooded with names, dates, and deaths. I didn't understand why, but I had to write them down. The ink felt heavy, like it carried the weight of lives. My parents thought I was ill, but I wasn't sick. I was cursed. Every name I wrote was someone I'd never met. Every date, a moment I'd never seen. Yet, as the years passed, I learned the truth. Every entry came true. A farmer in our village died exactly as I'd written. A neighbor's child, gone on the day I'd marked. The diary wasn't just a book, it was a window into fate. I hid it in the attic, terrified of its power. Now, decades later, I've opened it again. The diary's leather cover is worn, its pages brittle, but the words remain sharp. Each entry is precise, a name, a date, a cause of death. I remember the first entry vividly. Elijah Hart, June 12, 1883, crushed by a cart. I was 11 when it happened, and I saw the cart roll over him in the market square. My heart stopped. I'd written it a year before. No one believed me when I tried to warn them. They called me strange, a child with a wild imagination. But the deaths kept coming, each matching my words. A woman drowned in the river, just as I described. A man struck by lightning, exactly on the date I'd noted. The diary wasn't guessing, it was dictating. I began to fear sleep, knowing I'd wake with another name. What was guiding my hand? Was it me or something else? By 1884, I'd filled half the diary, each page a grim prophecy. I tried to stop writing, to break the cycle, but the names came anyway. They'd whisper in my dreams, relentless, until I gave in. My mother found me once, crying over the book, ink smeared on my fingers. She begged me to burn it, but I couldn't. The diary felt alive, like it was watching me. I started hiding my entries, writing in code, but it didn't matter. The deaths still happened. A schoolteacher fell from a ladder, just as I predicted. A blacksmith burned in his forge, exactly as I'd written. People began to whisper about me, calling me a witch. I was just a child, but the diary made me something else. It made me a harbinger. I began researching the names in the diary, desperate for answers. Who were these people? Why was I seeing their fates? Some lived miles away, others in distant towns. I'd never met them, yet their deaths were etched in my mind. I visited libraries, poring over records, trying to find a pattern. There was none, just death, relentless and precise. One entry haunted me most. Clara Wren, April 3rd, 1885, poisoned. I found her name in a newspaper a year later. She died exactly as I'd written, her tea laced with arsenic. I was shaking when I read it, the diary heavy in my hands. How could I know these things? Was I causing them? The thought kept me awake, staring at the book. I tried to change the future once, to prove I wasn't powerless. The diary named Thomas Gray, September 9th, 1886, trampled by horses. I found him, a stable hand in a nearby village. I begged him to stay away from the stables that day. He laughed, thinking me mad, but promised to be careful. I thought I'd won, that I'd broken the curse. But the diary was never wrong. On September 9th, a spooked horse broke free and trampled him in the street. I watched it happen, helpless, my warning useless. The diary wasn't just predicting, it was sealing fates. I buried it deeper in the attic, vowing never to touch it again. But the name still came, haunting my dreams. The diary's power grew stronger as I aged, its pull inescapable. By 1887, I'd stopped fighting it and wrote what it demanded. Each entry felt heavier, like I was carving gravestones. I started noticing patterns, not in the deaths, but in me. My health faded with every page I filled. My hair thinned, my hands shook, my eyes grew hollow. The diary was draining me, feeding on my life to fuel its predictions. Yet I couldn't stop. A merchant died in a fire, as I'd written. A child succumbed to fever on the exact day. The townsfolk began to fear me, whispering as I passed. I didn't blame them. I feared myself. What was this book, and why had it chosen me? I began to wonder if the diary was older than me, its origins darker than I could imagine. Its leather was etched with symbols I couldn't read, faint but deliberate. I traced them with my finger, feeling a chill. Were they a warning, or a spell? I found a book on ancient rites, hinting at objects that could bind a soul to fate. Was that what the diary was? A relic, using me as its voice? I tried to destroy it once, holding it over a fire, but my hands wouldn't move, frozen by some unseen force. The diary wanted to live, and it needed me. Another death came true that night, a sailor, lost at sea. I wept, knowing I was trapped. By 1889, the diary was nearly full, its pages crowded with names. I'd stopped leaving the house, too afraid to face the world I'd foretold. My family had abandoned me, calling me cursed. They weren't wrong. Each night, I'd write, my hand guided by something I couldn't name. A baker, crushed by a falling beam. A widow, taken by illness. Every entry was a weight on my soul. I began to see the dead in my dreams, their faces accusing. "Why did you write us?" they'd ask. I had no answer. The diary was a mirror, showing me a world I couldn't escape. I was its prisoner, and it was far from done. I started questioning my own existence, wondering if I was even human. Was I born to carry this burden, or had I been chosen? The diary never explained, but it never stopped. I wrote of a mayor's death, and he collapsed at a banquet. I predicted a flood, and it claimed 3 lives, just as I'd seen. The townsfolk now avoided me entirely, crossing the street when I appeared. I didn't care. I was lost in the diary's world. Its pages were my reality, its predictions my truth. I began to wonder if my own name would appear one day. The thought terrified me, but I kept writing. The diary demanded it. As the diary's final pages loomed, I felt a shift, like it was preparing for something greater. The names grew more prominent: governors, scholars, even a priest. Their deaths were more public, more shocking. A governor choked on his dinner, as I'd written. A scholar fell from a tower, exactly on the date. The priest's death was the worst, struck by a falling cross in his own church. People began to talk, not just locally, but across the country. Newspapers called it a string of tragedies. I knew better. It was the diary, weaving its web. I was its scribe, and the world was its canvas. What would happen when the last page was filled? In 1890, I reached the diary's final pages, my heart pounding with every word. The predictions grew darker, more precise. I wrote of entire families perishing, of accidents that shook towns. Each came true, leaving me hollow. A family burned in their home, just as I described. A bridge collapsed, killing dozens, on the exact day. I began to feel the diary's end approaching, but not its power. It was as if it was saving its worst for last. I stopped eating, barely slept, consumed by the book. My hands were stained with ink, my mind with guilt. I was no longer a child, but the diary hadn't aged. It was timeless, eternal, and I was its vessel. I tried to find others who might understand, seeking out scholars of the occult. Most dismissed me, but one, an old man in London, listened. He examined the diary, his face paling as he read. He spoke of ancient oracles, cursed to see the future, but never change it. He called the diary a fate binder, a relic that trapped its bearer in a cycle of prophecy. He warned me not to finish it, but I had no choice. The names kept coming, relentless. A soldier died in a duel, as I'd written. A seamstress fell ill on the exact day. The old man refused to help further, saying I was doomed. I left, clutching the diary, knowing he was right. The diary began to predict my own town's downfall, naming people I knew. My childhood friend Sarah was next, July 7th, 1891, a fall from a cliff. I begged her to stay indoors, but she laughed, calling me paranoid. I watched her leave that day, my heart breaking. She fell, just as I'd written, her body found at the cliff's base. I stopped speaking to anyone after that, isolating myself completely. The diary named my neighbor, my teacher, even my cousin. Each died, exactly as foretold. I was a plague, carrying death in my hands. The diary was no longer just a book. It was my judge, my executioner. I hated it, but I couldn't let go. I began to see the diary's predictions in my waking hours, not just dreams. I'd walk through town and see a face, knowing their fate. A butcher set to die in a fire. A child destined to drown. I stopped looking people in the eye, afraid I'd see their deaths. The diary was changing me, rewriting my soul. I wrote of a plague sweeping a nearby village, and it happened, claiming hundreds. I predicted a storm that sank a ship, killing all aboard. Each entry felt like a piece of me dying. I was no longer a person, just a conduit for the diary's will. Its pages were nearly full, but its hunger was endless. I tried to give the diary away, to free myself from its grip. I left it on a church doorstep, hoping someone else would take it. But the next morning, it was back in my attic, untouched. I threw it into a river, watching it sink. By nightfall, it was on my desk, dry as bone. The diary wouldn't leave me. It was bound to me. I wrote of a judge's death, and he collapsed in court. A baker's wife, poisoned by her own bread. Each death tightened the diary's hold. I began to hear it whisper, not just names, but taunts. "You can't stop," it said. I was losing my mind, or maybe I'd already lost it. The diary's symbols began to glow faintly at night, pulsing with my heartbeat. I studied them, desperate for meaning, but they were in a language I couldn't decipher. I felt they were mocking me, hiding the truth. I wrote of a merchant's death, and he was robbed and killed on the road. A nun, crushed by a falling statue, as I predicted. The diary was relentless, its predictions more frequent. I stopped leaving my house, afraid of what I'd see. The world outside was a graveyard, each death a mark of my failure. I was no longer writing the diary. It was writing me. I was its tool, its voice, its prisoner. I began to dream of the diary's creation, visions of shadowed figures and ancient rites. They chanted over a book, binding it with blood. Was that the diary? Was I seeing its birth? The dreams felt real, like memories that weren't mine. I wrote of a doctor's death, and he was found lifeless in his clinic. A child, taken by a stray dog, just as I'd seen. The diary was a parasite, feeding on my fear. I tried to pray, but the words felt empty. The diary was my God now, and it demanded worship. Its pages were nearly full, but I sensed it wasn't done. What was its final purpose? What was mine? I started noticing the diary's predictions were changing, becoming grander. It named kings, generals, people I'd only read about. A prince, poisoned at a banquet. A general, killed in battle. Each came true, reported in newspapers I could barely afford. The diary was reaching beyond my small world, touching the powerful. I felt its ambition, its desire to shape history. I was just a boy from a village, yet I held this power. Or did it hold me? I wrote of a diplomat's death, and it happened. A scientist, struck by a falling beam. The diary was a force, and I was its scribe. I feared what it would demand next. The townsfolk began to suspect me, whispering of witchcraft. They'd seen too many deaths, too many coincidences. I couldn't blame them. I'd have feared me too. I hid in my attic, the diary my only company. I wrote of a mayor's death, and he was found lifeless in his office. A teacher, killed by a falling tree. Each death was a nail in my coffin. I began to wonder if the diary was punishing me, forcing me to bear witness. Its pages were almost full, and I felt my own end nearing. Would I write my own name? The thought consumed me, but I kept writing. The diary's final pages were different, heavier, as if imbued with purpose. I wrote of a great fire that would consume a city, and it happened, killing thousands. I predicted a war, and it began, just as I'd seen. The diary was no longer content with single lives. It wanted empires. I was terrified, but I couldn't stop. My hand moved on its own, filling the pages. A queen assassinated. A scholar drowned in a flood. Each death was a spectacle, a message. The diary was speaking to the world, and I was its voice. I felt myself fading, my life tied to its ink. What would happen when the last page was turned? In 1892, I reached the diary's final page, my hands trembling as I wrote. The predictions were apocalyptic now, visions of chaos. I saw cities fall, nations crumble, all in my childish scrawl. A king beheaded in a revolt, a fleet sunk by a storm. Each came true, shaking the world. I was no longer a person, just a shadow of the diary's will. My body was frail, my mind frayed, but the diary was vibrant, alive. I began to suspect it would outlive me, finding another to carry its curse. I wrote of a plague, and it swept through Europe, a battle, and it claimed thousands. The diary was rewriting history, and I was its pawn. I tried to warn the world, sending letters to newspapers about the diary. They called me mad, a fraud, but the deaths kept coming. A senator, struck by a carriage. A poet, dead by his own hand. The diary's reach was endless, its accuracy terrifying. I began to see it as a god, cruel and unyielding. I was its prophet, but I had no power. The townsfolk tried to burn my house, believing I was the cause. I escaped, clutching the diary, knowing it wouldn't let me die. Not yet. It had one final prediction, one last page. I was too afraid to read it, but too weak to resist. The diary began to write itself, my hand moving without thought. It named disasters, wars, deaths of people unborn. I saw the future stretch beyond my life, into centuries I'd never see. A city swallowed by fire, a nation torn by war. Each vision was clearer, more vivid. I was no longer predicting. I was witnessing. The diary was showing me the end of the world, or perhaps its rebirth. I wrote of a leader, killed by a mob. A scientist, crushed by his own machine. The diary was relentless, its purpose unclear. Was it warning me, or commanding me? I was too tired to care, too broken to fight. I began to see my own name in the diary's pages, not written, but implied. Every death felt like a step toward my own. I was aging too fast, my body failing under the diary's weight. I wrote of a flood, and it came, drowning a valley, a fire, and it consumed a forest. The diary was a force of nature, and I was its servant. I tried to pray again, but the words were gone. The diary was my faith, my curse, my everything. I knew the final page would name me, but I didn't know when. I kept writing, each word a chain. The world was unraveling, and I was its scribe. The diary's symbols glowed brighter now, burning my eyes. I saw them in my dreams, twisting into shapes that screamed. They were alive, speaking a language I couldn't understand. I wrote of a revolution, and it began, toppling a kingdom, a disease, and it spread, killing thousands. The diary was no longer content with small deaths. It wanted chaos. I was its instrument, my life a sacrifice. I began to hear voices, not just names, but commands. Write, they said. Finish it. I was too weak to resist, too afraid to stop. The diary was my master, and I was its slave. I hid the diary again, burying it in a locked chest. But it called to me, its voice louder than ever. I wrote of a tsunami, and it struck, wiping out a coast. A warlord, assassinated by his own men. The diary was a tide, pulling me under. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, living only for its words. My body was a husk, my mind a ruin. The townsfolk had forgotten me, but the diary hadn't. It needed me to finish its work. I was terrified of the final page, but I couldn't look away. It was my destiny, written in ink. The diary's final prediction was the worst, a vision of darkness. I saw the world consumed, cities reduced to ash. I wrote it down, my hand shaking, knowing it would come true. A president, killed by a bomb. A nation, torn by famine. The diary was no longer just predicting. It was commanding. I felt its power surge, filling me with dread. I was no longer a person, just a vessel for its will. The symbols burned now, searing my skin when I touched them. I knew the diary was ending, but not its curse. It would find another, and another forever. I was just the first. I tried to destroy the diary one last time, smashing it with a hammer. It didn't even dent, its pages pristine. I set it on fire, but the flames wouldn't touch it. The diary was immortal, and I was not. I wrote of a comet, and it streaked across the sky, killing thousands. A queen, poisoned by her court. The diary was a god, and I was its disciple. I felt my own death approaching, my name unwritten but inevitable. The final page was blank, but I knew it was mine. I was ready, or so I thought. The diary had one last trick, one last horror. As I wrote the final words, the diary began to hum, a low, terrible sound. The symbols glowed red, then white, burning my hands. I saw my own death, clear as day. December 31st, 1892, by my own hand. I tried to resist, to throw the pen away, but it wouldn't leave my grip. The diary was writing me now, my fate sealed. I saw the world beyond, a future of fire and ruin. The diary wasn't just a book. It was a key, unlocking something ancient. I was its sacrifice, its final act. I wrote my name, tears falling, knowing it was over. The diary closed itself, and I felt its power fade. But it wasn't gone, it was waiting. The diary is silent now, but I know it's not done. It sits in my attic, waiting for another to claim it. I'm old, broken, but I'm still here for now. My death is coming, as I wrote, and I can't stop it. The diary predicted every death, every tragedy, and it never lied. I've lived my life in its shadow, a prisoner of its pages. I warn you, whoever finds it next, don't open it. Don't read its words. It will take you, as it took me. The diary is alive, and it's hungry. My time is almost up, but yours may begin. Will you dare to turn its pages? The choice is yours, but the diary always wins. If this chilling tale of the Prodigy's diary gripped you, subscribe to the channel for more stories that unravel the unexplainable. Hit the bell icon, join our community, and let's explore the mysteries together. Don't miss the next chapter, What's Waiting in the Shadows.